Welcome to RHI Social Publicity Interviews, where we meet with global thought leaders on nightlife and the social economy. Today we are here with Ivonne Roman, co-founder of the 30 by 30 initiative, with 25 years of experience in policing, serving in every rank from police officer to police chief in the Newark, New Jersey Police Department. Roman earned a Master of Public Administration and a Master of Science in Public Policy from Rutgers-Camden University, and is working toward a PhD in Public Affairs. She serves on the boards of the American Society for Evidence-Based Policing and Measures for Justice. She is a fellow at the National Policing Institute, the National Institutes of Justice Leads, and Open Society's Leadership in Government. Her TED Talk on women in policing has nearly 2 million views. In March 2021, she co-founded the 30 by 30 initiative to increase the representation of women in policing to 30% by 2030. Welcome to today's interview. Well, hello. It's great to have this opportunity to talk with you. It's actually quite an honor with the background and the history that you have. So welcome, and I'd like to proceed with some of our questions.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, just give me a brief background. Obviously you're a unique person in this world of policing and how you've risen so much to the top tiers. But what's your background? Where you're from, and how did you arrive at getting involved in police work?
So I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, where I became a police officer when I was 22. I quickly rose through the ranks. The testing procedures there for promotions were based on a written and oral exams. So I was able to take the promotional exam when I had 3 years in. So I was a sergeant by the time I had 5 years. And by the time I had 19 years on the job, I had been appointed to chief. So I was born and bred in Newark, and that's where I became the chief of police, and I rose through the ranks. I wanted to become a journalist, and my mom discouraged it. She said that I would starve to death. So she made me take business in college. And my roommate was really interested into going into a policing career. So she sent in the application for both of us, and I got hired first, and then eventually she came on, and we both wound up becoming police officers. So, it's kind of like weird when I say I wanted to be a journalist, but I became a cop. But there are parallels. You take and you follow leads to the logical conclusion. A lot of policing is report writing and communication. So my interest in journalism really did help me excel in the promotional exams and excel in my assignments in investigative capacity.
It must have been interesting to see your mother's face when you said, I'm not going to be a journalist. I'm going to become a police officer.
Yeah, I mean, it was unexpected. She was hoping I would get a degree in business, but it wasn't for me. It has to be something you're passionate about.
So obviously you're a groundbreaker in a lot of ways in terms of women in policing, but there's still a lot more that has to be done. And you're part of this initiative, 30 by 30. So when did you get involved in that, and what's its primary purpose? What's its goal?
When I was a captain in the Newark Police Department, we were implementing a very aggressive hiring plan. Like so many agencies, Newark had laid off 167 police officers in 2010. But then through attrition, we were actually down 400 officers. So we had to hire quickly. And what I found was that no matter where we sent our recruits in the state to academies, we were losing anywhere between 65 and 80% of our female applicants. And we found that this was across the state. And I really took a deep dive to see what was happening, if there was a problem isolated to New Jersey or Newark or across the country. At the time, I was part of the Lead Scholars Program at the National Institute of Justice, where Maureen McGough was the senior policy advisor. I told her what I was seeing, and we took a deep dive into the research literature. And we found that the number of women in policing had stagnated over 30 years at around 12%, though there was a body of research that showed there were a lot of benefits to police departments and communities by increasing the representation of women. Benefits like reduction in lawsuits, reductions in excessive force complaints, higher satisfaction rates from citizens, better outcomes for crime victims and for investigations. So Maureen and I partnered together and created the 30 by 30 initiative. And the goal is to increase the representation of police women to 30% by 2030 by providing low cost and no cost solutions to police agencies. We provide technical support, and they in turn will report to us on a 6-month basis to create a community of practice where these police agencies learn from each other. So we started at 34 agencies and we're at 308 agencies now, spanning from small rural agencies to the NYPD, LAPD. We even have the FBI that signed on in March. So it's really grown exponentially.
Wow, that's exciting for you. Now, what did you discover about what was preventing the women from joining or those that were leaving? What were the underlying challenges that they were reporting as to why they weren't continuing or joining?
What we found is that they lose interest or applicants at different phases along the way through the background investigation, through the recruiting material in the academies, and then they lose them once they get them in because of attrition. They'll resign because of the culture isn't conducive to or welcoming at times to women. So there's different avenues that each agency has to look at and see where they specifically are losing candidates. For my state, the challenge was that they changed the fitness exam and moved the testing from the end of the academy to the beginning of the academy. And so that led to the huge increase in attrition rates for women because they hadn't yet gone through the physical fitness training. And research shows that, of course, if you're engaged in a physical fitness program, you will yield benefits. So what I found was that when I started intervening and training these women to pass this test, they could pass it around the 3-month mark. Academies were 5 months long, but because they moved that test to within the first 2 weeks, they were losing that large amount. So each agency would have to go and look at their processes and see where they're losing candidates or where candidates are being turned off. We have recruitment ads that show cops hanging off the back of a helicopter, right? And the agency doesn't own a helicopter, right? So it's a lot of, not realistic about the expectations of policing within that agency. So we find when you focus more on the service attributes to policing, that it attracts more candidates than the gun-ho warrior type of recruiting material.
So it was even just the material. When I wrote this article about women in the food service industry back in 1987, I interviewed some women who were students in hospitality management. And one of the things that they pointed out that they felt uncomfortable with is that all the textbooks in business talked about managers as a he. And so it was very difficult for them to relate to the concept of becoming a manager because all of the textbooks made it appear as if it's just men. So what you're saying, and what I hear you saying, is that the visual images that women saw were not necessarily aligned with their ambition, whereas with men, it may be much more so.
Right. So it's very gendered, right? When you the stereotype of a police officer is usually a man, right? So you have to change the image of what you expect a police officer to be and what policing actually means, right? So police officers are public servants. They tend to, though, focus on this paramilitary image that can be a turnoff to a diverse applicant pool, right? So if you want to diversify, you have to look at the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you're looking for in a police officer and make sure that you're recruiting to that. And when the research looks at the qualities that women bring, they find that women do bring better outcomes as far as community engagement, as far as your crime victims, as far as investigations and citizen satisfaction. And they also, as I mentioned earlier, reduce use of force and they have high satisfaction rates from citizens. So overall, really analyzing what it is you need for an effective police officer, we believe will diversify your applicant pool without specifically trying to target individual demographic groups.
So What do you still see today as challenges for women? I mean, now as you've been pursuing this 30 by 30, which you obviously have so many agencies signing on, are they still experiencing some challenges? I would think that just like many women, even though we'd like to think of ourselves as progressing, there's still, if there's children, then it's still a burden more so on women than men. There's the sexual harassment that is often depicted as a part of policing. There's domestic violence issues and aggression that occur. I mean, are these still factors that make women hesitate to get involved, or that the agencies aren't respectful of the different needs, as much as we wouldn't like to say that there are different needs, but that there still are different needs?
Agencies looking to attract more women have to look at the culture and the kind of policies that have in place and see if they're supportive of a diverse workforce. This means having maternity leave policies, having uniforms that are specific to a female body. We hear complaints about bulletproof vests not being adequate or not being shaped to a woman's figure. So these are challenges that an agency has to look at to see if they have to be addressed or to see what the needs are specifically within their agency. We also have to make sure that agencies have policies on sexual harassment that are actually enforced, that they're not just papers that they show in court in case they get sued, that everyone is aware of the sexual harassment policy, and that when there are issues that they're investigated thoroughly, fairly, and confidentially. The agency has to also have policies in place as far as supporting families. And this isn't just for women, but it's supporting families as a whole. Having maternity leave policies, having family leave policies. And this isn't an issue that's isolated to policing, but it's really felt when women enter into policing because it's a male-dominated environment, and these are issues that they haven't addressed in the past. So if you want to diversify your agency, you have to look at where there are issues that are being experienced and address those. And that's what we ask of our agencies, is that they look at their policies, they look at the culture, and that they not just recruit women in and have them survive, but they're actually thriving. And this also means equal access to career development opportunities. A lot of the skill sets that women bring to policing means that they get assigned to things like youth aid or domestic violence or sex crimes. And those are fields in which they excel, but you have to make sure that if someone has aspirations for promotions, that they aren't pigeonholed in those assignments for a very long time, because then they don't get to diversify their skill sets and to make themselves competitive for promotions. So there's a wide variety of factors that an agency head has to consider when looking at whether their culture is conducive to attracting women and to helping them thrive through the career progression.
Quite informative, very insightful. But also there's the other variable or factor, which it has to do with race and ethnicity. And clearly the challenges exist for women, mostly because, like you say, it's a male-dominated field. And while there has been some inroads in diversifying the racial and ethnic background of police officers, it still seems much more oriented to the male. How does the perception of women who come from backgrounds where they're people of color, or people that are often seen as isolated, and involving them more to say, yeah, this is a great career for you to get into, in spite of all of the publicity of racial bias and aggression against people of color by police? I mean, this seems to be a very difficult environment, not only just to attract women, but also to attract women that come from this diverse background.
Right. So the issue of intersectionality is an important one that you bring up. So there's research that shows that the groups that are most underrepresented are Black women and Asian women. So there tends to be a higher representation of white women in policing, followed by Latino. And then you have these underrepresented groups. And so when you're recruiting, you have to determine what communities are you're recruiting from, and to make sure that you're targeting all the demographics that you're looking to recruit from in order to meet the community's needs. Let's say you have specific cultures there or languages that you would like to have represented in the police department. When I was looking at the data from Newark, when we were losing individuals, what we were overwhelmingly losing were women of color, specifically Black women, followed by Latino women. We were having better outcomes for white women. And what I found in talking with these women was that a lot of the white women had family members that were police officers that could mentor them through the process and let them know what to expect and how to prepare. And a lot of the Black and Latino women didn't have that access to mentors that can walk them through the process, level set expectations, help them prepare. So they went in at a disadvantage, right? They may have not been as physically prepared or knowing what expectations of academy life would be like. So those are attributes that when an agency is aware of it, they can plan for it. So you've had agencies like Baltimore, for example. What they did is they started training people, not just women, but men and women, to familiarize themselves with what to expect in the background process, what to expect for physical fitness, and actually training them to pass these exams. So that kind of level sets where you don't have access to a mentor, but now you're getting that same kind of information from the inside track, right? And it does allow also to build relationships between the police department and the community when you make those efforts to actually help people not just apply, but to be successful in the application process and to be able to carry it on through to successfully passing the academy.
So it sounds to me like you've really thought through and have helped to nurture this change in culture and this environment of, police administrations at least embracing this idea of bringing on more women of color. And so there's a lot aimed at that. But how are male officers responding to this kind of initiative like you're talking about? Do they feel any kinds of threats, or they feel like they're not being recognized, or that their role is being, made into something that they're not necessarily as proud of, because you have all of this information coming out about the effectiveness of women in regards to, lawsuits and response to conflict situations? I mean, how are the men adapting to this new culture?
So that's a great question. This isn't a zero-sum game, right? So we know that in policing, there's a recruitment crisis. People are not applying. I've spoken to agency heads that said they used to get 20,000 applications, and now they're lucky if they get 2,000, right? And then the individuals, as they start doing the background checks, can't pass the background checks. So they can't keep up with the staffing levels, right? So I think that a lot of the success that we've had with agencies being interested in the 30 by 30 initiative is that they realize they have to get more creative as far as their recruitment and to recruit a more diverse applicant pool. So we never advocate for lowering standards, right? We're saying that if you get right about the knowledge, skills, and abilities that police officers require, that would naturally give you a more diversified applicant pool. So we sometimes have knee-jerk reactions where someone will say this is an affirmative action program, and absolutely not, right? We're merely making the research that is available publicly known as to the benefits of diversifying your applicant pool by increasing the number of women in policing, the benefits that it brings to communities and to police departments. But that's not to say that these aren't traits that men can't have or don't innately have. I love to use the example of my first partner. He had these great communication skills, great de-escalation skills before they ever existed. And no matter who we wound up arresting at the end of the night, they were thanking him because of the way that he engaged with individuals. So because women tend to be more communicative, nurturers, they have that communication skill where they're looking to de-escalate tensions. Usually a woman is not quick to want to go hand to hand with an individual. She can get that person to comply without having to get physical. That's the route that they get. So these aren't traits that are necessarily solely for women, but that they're innately found in the way that women normally communicate and engage with others. So we like to make sure that people understand we're not asking for the lowering of standards, and women themselves aren't asking for the lowering of standards because they want to feel welcomed, and they don't want the individuals that they're working with to feel like they didn't have to go through the same process as male counterparts, right? So it's a tight line that we're walking, right? But we want people to understand that this doesn't mean that we're saying men don't make good officers, right? We're saying that the research shows that the traits that you're looking for, that communities want, are innately found in this group that has typically not been recruited and sought after. So if you diversify your recruitment and you diversify who you're trying to attract, you will increase your applicant pool and reap benefits that the research shows are found with female style of policing. And so also diversifying who you typically recruit, right? So usually agencies would look at veterans and criminal justice programs, but now there's more outreach into social work, into nursing, bartending, any of these types of careers that are service oriented and involve communication, interpersonal communication. Most assignments that police officers respond to have to do with interpersonal conflict, right? There will be, your adrenaline type of jobs, but those come sporadically. Your day-to-day assignments will be mediating interpersonal conflicts. So hiring from a pool that is used to dealing with the public, used to communicating, is actually very successful when looking for police candidates.
This gets to the final point that I want to discuss with you. A lot of our work really has to do around nightlife and nightlife settings, and there's been increasing attention, as I mentioned, with the Alicia, who works with us, who's been studying women's safety and security and what women want. And there are many variables that are in the environment, kind of a septet model of creating safer environments, not only for women, but for all people, but women in particular, who tend to be much more victims of certain types of crime at night. And so the policing of these nightlife districts have traditionally been more oriented to, we just need to have more police officers because it's the threat of the police being there that will change the behavior of individuals. But I've noticed in my own experience that it sometimes can exacerbate that. But how do women supervisors or women in the field that are involved in these nightlife districts, you have not only sexual harassment and aggression, you have just, kind of meathead behavior that happens in nightlife districts, incivility, and you have conflicts all relating to that. And then ultimately you have this increasing amount of gun violence because these conflicts escalate. So where does the presence of women in the field change the dynamic of approaching how you manage these public space activities and respond to incidents in venues where there may be aggressive behavior? And what does the role of a woman police officer play that's maybe different than a male police officer?
As I mentioned earlier, the way that women police tends to be more relying on communications and de-escalation. And you mentioned that sometimes having a heavy presence of police officers in an area can exacerbate situations. And this is because it tends to be some over-policing or heavy-handed policing, a lot of arrests for minor infractions that can actually hurt a business district, right? So I think that it's important to have officers that work in such an environment like a business district to be specially trained
as to the sensitivities of the area, how to deal with intoxicated patrons, how to clear areas quickly without escalating situations, and to be able to work collaboratively with those business districts. I've seen a lot of successful models where they use the business improvement district model, where they have security that is funded by the business district working in tandem with law enforcement, and they stand roll calls together. They share information. They share information about problematic locations, problematic patrons, and this sharing of information helps to decrease crime while also increasing attendance at these business improvement districts, and increasing your the attendance there, the businesses, the development. I, for one, helped establish the business improvement district in downtown Newark, and crime really went down significantly, about 60% within the first 2 years. And it led to a development, a pipeline of about $1 billion. So that model had to do with the way that policing changed there, that it was actually a public-private partnership where information was shared, where you talked about SEPTED, where problematic locations were addressed in tandem with city services, the police department, and the business improvement district, so that it was a holistic approach to these problems, instead of having the police officers act like whack-a-mole, right? And come in and be an occupying force and then leave. So establishing a safe place so that people know what the expectations are when you visit that place, and what to expect as far as safety and the collaboration between the public and private security forces.
Well, this has been a wonderful interview. I mean, clearly I could just talk with you forever because you just have so much knowledge and experience, and it's such a noble cause. And I'm really proud that I had this opportunity to speak with you, and look forward to collaborating again in the future. So I want to thank you for your time, and wish you a lot of luck. And if there's anything we could do to help promote your initiative among the people that we work with, I think we'll certainly do that.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time and the opportunity to share some of the 30 by 30.